Tell Us How to Make It Better is partnering with the Readiness Lab, the home for podcasts, webinars, and training in the field of emergency and disaster services. I'm George Siegel, and this is the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. Every week, we introduce you to people who are working on real-world problems and providing actual solutions. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me on the Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. Every week, we try to introduce you to people who saw a problem and rather than just sit around and complain about it, actually went out and did something about it. And that certainly applies to my guest today. Back in 2015, you might remember this story, which was pretty big in the news at the time, when a mailman from Florida landed an ultralight gyrocopter on the lawn of the U.S. Capitol building, uninvited and unannounced. He's also the author of a new book about his adventure and why he took such a risk to make this statement. The book is called Flight Plan, A Mailman's Aerial Adventure and Special Delivery. Doug Hughes, welcome.
Thanks for having me, George.
So, Doug, tell us what it is that you were trying to accomplish back in 2015 and still working on today.
My mission to move the world is to make people aware that they have the power to reform the government so that they work for us instead of working for the people with money. So it's just a message.
It's a very powerful message and a very important message, because I really get the feeling in almost every issue that comes up that they're not really working for us. And that goes for both sides of the aisle. But you took a really bold step, and it was interesting in the book how you went through the progression of it. What made you think of doing something that was making such a statement? I mean, you could have just mailed the letters, you could have driven up in a van and dropped them off. Yet you learned how to fly and you flew onto the Capitol. What was the thought process there?
Well, the thought process was that in order to get in the news, and I was a mailman at the time with hardly two dimes to rub together most of the time, for me to make a statement, I had to do something dramatic. And what I did was a stunt. I've used that word before. I continue to use it now. Okay. I didn't make anything change. I got the attention of the people. But what I did that was special is that I directed that attention to a message. And I tried to direct that attention to the groups who were working actually on making real physical change in our political system on the issue of big money in politics.
Now, a lot of the people that you talk about in the book, they would go to protests, and their way of making a statement was to get arrested and get the publicity from that. You took a much bigger step than that. And you had to, I truly got the sense as you were going along that you were aware of the consequences, but you did it anyway. I mean, they could have shot you out of the sky. They could have done a lot of things to stop you. So I know you ended up paying for your, I guess you could say, crime in the end, but you took a big risk getting to that point.
I had to take a big risk in order to make the statement. And I had it structured because I wrote 535 letters to Congress, which I carry with me on the way. Each of them individually addressed, and all of them identically declaring that Congress has got to quit working for the money and start working for us. I knew, and I had arranged that if I got killed, those letters would survive, that is, electronically. And I had already interviewed with the media. So, although it wasn't my preferred outcome, I knew if I got killed, I'd wind up getting more publicity than if I survived.
How'd your wife feel about that? I mean, was that a hill worth dying on to you? I mean, I know it's a passion for you, so I don't really want to belittle it by saying, really, was it worth dying for? But you were resigned to the fact that if they shot you down, it would be worth it.
Yes, absolutely. I was resigned to that. I've got to step back in the story in order to explain why my wife, she didn't support me, but she didn't oppose me. So I guess you could say she let me do it. I had gotten into looking at the dysfunction in government, and being an old guy, you've got decades to draw from to measure the dysfunction. And a friend and I researched it, and we came to the conclusion, by not looking at individual issues, but looking at the structure, that every time things didn't happen, or every time something good got twisted around, there was money behind it as the mechanism to thwart the benefit for the people and divert the benefit to the pockets of fat cats. Okay? And we came on this as a consistent and repeating theme, and we went, wait, instead of us saying we want to engage on this issue or that issue, or whatever, we went, wait, if you fix the method, and if you erect a wall of separation between big money and our government, then things would start to happen. We would start to work together. We would come up, not always with the solutions that I prefer, but we'd come up with solutions. So it was in this period of time that I was committed to the idea of getting big money out of politics that my adult son from my first marriage committed suicide by head-on collision, killing the driver of the other car. And that really screwed up my head, partly because of my Catholic upbringing, and because my son was dead and not in a position to atone for what he had done. I fell into a very deep mental condition where I took on the blame myself. And there's nothing in Catholicism by which I should have done that. To be fair to the Catholic Church, any priest would have told me that, wait, what your son did is not something you can or should ever atone for. But somebody else got killed, and that really worked on my head. There's some other family was without a guy who was only a few years younger than me, retired, and didn't go home because of my son. So I was very much on the path to suicide. And I know I'm taking a long way around the barn, but what happened is I still had this conviction about money in politics, and since I was going to kill myself anyway, why not go ahead and take a huge risk to try and make a statement, to try and make my demise worth something? I didn't know how to fly at the time when I came up with the idea. It took me over a year to learn how to fly, get a plane, get the plane ready. So it was a large delay. And by the time I made the flight, I was mentally healthy again. And I was committed to doing it as when I was suicidal, because I realized that there really was the opportunity, if I did this, to bring the attention to money in politics. I'm sorry, I'm answering your question. My wife found out that I had bought a gyrocopter and I was taking lessons. And she said, oh no. She wanted me to get rid of the plane. And I explained to her, wait, I'm doing this because of money in politics. And I explained to her what my plan was. And she was like, oh, no, you're not. Okay, she's completely against it. And I said, I told you what was going to happen to me when I ran out of options, because I had already told her that I was suicidal. I made it clear to her that if she exerted her power to stop this from happening, then somewhere not too much further down the line, she's got to attend my funeral in black. And that's not a nice way to negotiate with your spouse. I don't recommend it to anyone, and I wouldn't do that now. Okay, I did it then because I was really, really messed up.
Sure.
During the delay time during which I got my head together, I developed the messaging. This is the great thing about the fact that there was so much time between the idea and the execution. I was able to come up with, okay, I need a website for this. And I did that. And it was my friend's idea that I come up with letters to Congress. And I realized that was where the messaging would exist. And during that delay, I realized I had to draw the media into this in advance so that my word would be there even if I was dead. I would have been interviewed ahead of time, and there would be somebody to counter the argument that the administration would make that they shot down somebody whom they think was either a terrorist or a nut. And so all of that was in place when I made the flight. Most people don't appreciate that the reason there was video of me flying, there was interviews of me explaining why I made the flight during the time I was in jail for 24 hours after I made the flight. That video was all there because of the planning. And I wound up taking the narrative away from the administration when I made the landing because of the planning.
Yeah, you certainly have to control that. And I think it's interesting because you can plan everything that you did. I mean, while people on the surface will look at it and say, you're crazy, as I was reading the book, I understood, I not having been in that position, obviously I wouldn't understand the impact of the grief, but understood where you were going with that. And then how you turned it into what you ended up doing. Now you could put all that planning in, and then there could be another big news story that day. It's like anything can happen to derail your plan. Everything had to kind of fall together for you.
Absolutely. There was a huge amount of, and I think I used the phrase in the book, whether it's God or luck or Joss or karma, whatever name you want to put onto it, there was way too many coincidences in how this came together. And I don't know the mind of God, I don't pretend to, but it did come together, and there wasn't anything that competed with it. It sure as hell wasn't my skill or good looks.
Now what's interesting too, is you can have an idea like that and your passion gets behind it. The gentleman you were planning it with is like a couple of guys having beers after work talking about an idea. Were you afraid at any time that maybe there wouldn't be enough impetus behind it that would make it all worthwhile? Like maybe you're doing this for nothing? Because that's the feeling I got during the book at times, was that it's like throwing a party and nobody comes to the party. Was that fear existing in you as you were going through all this?
Yeah, but here's what put me over the top, and particularly after I got my emotional balance back and I was thinking about it. I thought that the plan would work. I knew that the plan might not work. But what if I hadn't done it? And it's 20 years from now. Okay? And I go, I don't know if I could have changed the direction of the country with that act of trying to raise the energy to direct people to act, to get big money out of politics, to restore the power of government back to the people instead of the people with money. I thought it was a good idea, and I knew there was only one way to test it, and I had to put my ass on the line. All right? But if I hadn't done that, I might have lived to be 90 years old and wonder. And I couldn't have lived with that.
You certainly left regret out of the equation, but you got to be frustrated by the way things are in the world now. I would say politically, we're much worse off than we were back in 2015. And to me, what shocks me is even politicians that I used to think might have been in it because they actually care. I don't get the sense, if I was to have political trading cards here, that there's any card I'd want to put in my save pile, because I think they're all out for themselves. I don't think anybody's really looking out for us. And it's like putting the toothpaste back in the tube. We'll throw more cliches at this. You're asking people to relinquish what's making them rich and padding their pockets for the good of us. I don't think they'll ever change. We really got to, the bottom line is we got to replace them with people that do care about us.
Exactly. And the book is 90% the story of what went into my flight and what happened after the flight. But 10% of it, I explain to people how we can fix this. And the first political element that I introduced is the one that you just brought up. The conclusion that I came to, that we cannot ever, as citizens, apply enough pressure to our elected officials to get a crooked politician to vote for the reform that would end big money in politics. We can't put that pressure on our elected officials to make them do it, no matter what we do. But we can replace them. And this is the end of the book, as I realized there is a way that we can, in one election, replace the dishonest politicians, and there's Democrats and Republicans, okay, in that group. We can identify and replace the corrupt politicians with people who would put the money out of politics. And when I hit on that, I knew I had to write the book.
Yeah, but don't you think politics corrupts? I mean, when I look at all these people in office that supposedly are representing us, they all get in. A lot of them aren't wealthy when they get in, but a lot of them are very wealthy when they get out. Yet they're in a job that takes all their time. So where's all that money coming from? Where are their pockets getting padded? They're picking up the stock tips. They're picking up the great investments. All the things that you and I are getting screwed on, they're getting rich on.
Well, let's step back and look at the two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And I'm not talking, not the voters, I'm talking the party administration. Okay. There is, particularly with the House of Representatives, okay, a natural majority to 85% of the House districts. That's 435 House districts. And most of them have a distinct red or blue flavor to them, to the degree that the incumbent has a 90-something, 93, 95% chance of getting reelected if he runs. Okay, so the people in the House of Representatives are automatically going to get reelected. Whenever a House seat does come vacant, okay, it is the party in control of that district, because like I said, they're mostly red or mostly blue. They handpick who they want to replace the person who's decided not to run again. All right, which means the Republicans look for a reliable Republican whom they can count on in Congress, and the Democrats handpick a Democrat whom they consider will be reliable. But where they use the word reliable, you or I would use the word corrupt. All right. These people are in the game of politics at this point, at the state level, okay? And they are playing the game according to the rules that, when they take those same set of rules to Washington, D.C., allows them to get filthy rich. It's not that they are corrupted by going to Washington, D.C., okay? They were of that state of mind, and if they weren't, they wouldn't have been handpicked by the parties. The people who you or I could identify as honest are almost always people who somehow beat the system and got elected when they were not the party pick. Okay.
Who do you like right now? I mean, either party is fine, but is there anybody in there that you think is above the BS, I guess you could say? Is there somebody that does care about everybody, not just a Democrat or a Republican? Because I would argue with you, once these people are in office, they forget that half the country is still living under their rule, or half their district, or whatever, wherever they're from, and they only focus on what's good for their little group. So who's better than that?
There's one guy, and I may be mispronouncing his name, from Maryland, called Sarbanes, and he has introduced and consistently been in favor of getting big money out of politics and ending the corporate domination. And I mean, for well over 8 years, he's been there consistently. And yeah, if you got him, away from the cameras and you asked him, okay, who's the real deal here in Congress, he could tell you who is just putting out BS when they run for election and who would actually vote to. Again, it's a matter of empowering the voters, which means disempowering the corporations. Now, but it's not about finding a savior, okay? And this is something the Democrats and the Republicans, I think, are really, really screwed up on, is that, who is the person, who is the trustworthy leader that we can all... No, I'm sorry, the person you need to trust is the person who's looking into the camera there. Trust yourself.
So it's kind of hard to find somebody who, you know, like I say, I almost think we do need a hero, somebody that transcends the average person, that wouldn't lose all their credibility if tomorrow Joe Biden came out and actually talked to the other side. If for 4 years Trump ever cared about anybody but his own party. It's like, I feel that anybody that's in the middle or anybody that's not in power at the time, they don't even think we exist. It's like they have their own agenda, no matter their agenda be damned, I guess you could say.
Well, okay, let me talk about what I mentioned before, the wall of separation between big money and our government. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If these people could not get rich in Congress before, during, or after a term of office, and they're running for re-election, they want to stay in, which is fine, okay, that they want to stay in Congress. If they can't do it by raising money, and they say, oh, how am I going to get elected if the old method, which was always going after big money, if that's been taken away from them, then they're going to say, well, wait, what I've got to do is start talking to the people in my district in the largest numbers possible. I've got to start doing town halls. I've got to start looking at AARP and other groups and say, look, can we get together so that I can listen to my constituents, because I need for them to vote for me. So what happens is democracy will break out for Democrats and Republicans when money is taken away as the way of getting reelected. They're going to have to start talking to and listening to voters.
Yeah, but I think then they'll just shuffle it to their families. They'll find ways to stuff it in the pockets of people around that person. I think that stuff goes on all the time, and it's just what I didn't come away in the book is thinking, although I loved your message, I didn't know that your idea of how to make it happen was a clear-cut way, because you could have some committee that oversees that, but then that committee gets corrupt. It's like, where do you? I mean, I'm frustrated by it, and I didn't sit in jail like you did after what you did. So, how do you get past? I just don't see how that could ultimately work.
Okay, first you identify that there are only 3 avenues of corruption. Okay, excuse me, of institutional corruption, of baked-in legal corruption. Okay, and I identify them in the book: before, during, and after. Before, that's campaign finance reform, which includes, unfortunately, Citizens United, which is a Supreme Court decision that allows unlimited corporate money in elections. So that one's got to go, all right? But then we got to bring the money limit way down and eliminate PACs, okay? So the only money that a politician can run on, okay, is small dollar donations from large numbers of people, all right? That's campaign finance, and I'm condensing it, but it's really not that complicated. Small money, only from citizens, and it's tracked. Well, it already is tracked to a large degree. There's a very small step to say we're looking at all of the money. You do away with the PACs, and nobody else except the candidates can advertise in the election. No outside groups advertising for or against candidates. All right.
That would sure be nice around elections, because then we wouldn't be inundated with all those commercials every 5 seconds. That
it would be a lot less money, okay, but it would all be messages from the candidates to the citizens, which is what it's about. Because an election is about you and me hiring the people who will represent us and spend our money for the public good. That's what an election is, okay? There is nowhere that an election is a deal between the government and the corporations. The first 3 words of the Constitution: we the people. This is a deal between us and the government we, first of all, created in the Constitution, and the government that we empower every time we have an election and we select the individuals. Okay, so we make it a deal. In actuality, in reality, it's a deal between us and the people we select, and everybody else can just sit it out because they're not part of the deal. All right.
Now, this plays into your definition of a patriot. I like that. But tell us what that definition is.
The definition of a patriot is a person who puts the well-being of the country ahead of their own personal benefit.
Yeah. Show me one. Show me one. I'd like to see one in office right now. And I would go across the board.
Again, we keep looking for them who is going to save us. Okay. And that is always the way it works in the movies. But here it's going to be us saving ourselves. Okay. This is me putting in the energy so that you will benefit, and you putting in the energy so that a million people whom you never meet will benefit.
Yeah, we got it.
The idea
Go ahead.
is that government is supposed to function for the people, not for the benefit of a select few.
So we have to have Dwayne Johnson fly in on the gyrocopter and then save the world when he lands on the Capitol lawn.
It's a matter of us looking in the mirror and realizing that we're the ones who can do this. And we can't. But let me go back to the three areas of corruption. The second area of corruption, legal, institutional, never go to jail corruption, is insider trading. You mentioned it. Okay, these people go in to Congress. Most of them go in as millionaires, but 20% of them, not always the same 20%, every year double their net worth. Okay, this is an average number, but I've got footnotes in the book so you can look up where that number comes from. About 20% of Congress will double the net worth every year due to insider trading and insider deals while they're in Congress. And there's a solution to that. Okay, it's already been devised. It's already known. Okay, and it's a blind trust. Everybody in Congress would put their investment portfolio, if they're millionaires, they would put it in the hands of an investment company, and they don't get to know or direct where their money goes. They will have inside knowledge about what is going to happen in the country that they could get rich of, except they can't call their broker and tell them what to buy or what to sell. All right. If they do, not only could they go to jail, the broker goes to jail. So
yeah,
and it's like, wait, what if I am from a family that's like Kennedy or Bush, and we're worth like hundreds of millions of dollars? You're telling me that I can't know where my family's hundreds of millions of dollars is being invested? Exactly. And if you don't like that, don't run. Okay? Nobody in Congress would be able to know how their vote will affect their personal money. Okay?
I think people would find a way around it. I like the way that sounds. I don't know.
No. They could and would try to get around it. The problem is getting around it means you put yourself in legal jeopardy as far as going to jail is concerned. And there's a phrase that Mitt Romney came up with when he was running that I love, and it applies here. Self-deportation. The crooks will self-deport from Washington, D.C. If the only way they can get rich means risking a stint in jail, they will take their corrupt intent and they will go someplace else and they'll work a racket that they can get rich at that doesn't stand such a high probability of putting them in the slammer with big ugly people who won't like them.
Yeah, not to be a total cynic, but I think they might bring out a lower element of people that don't worry about that. So you might lose the rich guy that goes, yeah, it's not worth the risk. But now really the scumbags will come out because they'll take the risk and they'll find a way around the system. So that's what kind of makes me feel hopeless about it. I don't mean to be so negative about it because I would love to see what you're talking about work.
I don't take anything personally. There are people from Congress who have gone to jail for taking money. Okay, one Democrat who had a freezer full of money, cash money, and there was a Republican whom they convicted for. He was the head of a committee, and he was going to be paid millions of dollars from an aerospace company to deliver an aerospace airplane, military plane contract. Okay, these people have gone to jail. Okay. The FBI is very good at this. And if you bring in a low class of people, okay, they don't know how efficient the FBI and the federal government can be in detecting, proving, and sending your butt to jail for it. Would graft completely go away? No, I'm talking about eliminating the legal graft and only leaving the stuff that can send you to jail, because there's a huge deterrent effect there. But I've covered the two of the three. Let me go to the third one. Before is campaign finance reform. The second one is insider trading, or making money while you're in Congress. Okay. The third is after. After is the deals that you can get after you leave Congress, where you get rewarded for voting the way they wanted you to vote. Okay. Mm-hmm. Half of Congress, and I footnote this in the book, half of Congress, after they leave Congress, whether they lose election or they voluntarily retire, winds up either working as a registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C., or working in the lobbying industry, either for Wall Street or for a special interest group. Okay? And the names of these people are collected. I'm not tossing out something arbitrarily. I got it footnoted in my book, where you can go to see the list of names of people who were in government and are now working as lobbyists. You go from $175,000 a year as a member of Congress to, on average, $2 million per year as a lobbyist. That's why I say you can never apply enough external pressure to make these people honest. Okay? You're talking about them pissing away a $2 million a year job if they vote to make graft illegal. They will not do it. We have to replace everybody in Congress who's got their eye on a $2 million a year contract after they leave Congress. Right? So what I'm saying is, for a decade after these people leave Congress, their finances would be examined by a group that can't be affected by Congress, okay, who is looking for the appearance of impropriety, not bribery, the appearance that this looks or could look like a reward for a past vote that you cast. It was for the oil companies, it was for the coal companies, it was for the big pharmaceutical industries. They're not going to prove individual cases of they're saying, wait, you're a lawyer, you're in private practice, and you got paid $1.5 million for a contract that was 20 pages long and would have taken the average lawyer about 35 hours to write. It has the appearance of impropriety. It looks like, and you say, well, you can't prove it. No, we're not proving it. We're not taking it to court. We're taking the money away. You can't have $1.5 million for a contract, okay, that you should have charged $80,000 for.
Hey, that would clean up the deficit in a hurry if we started doing that.
Okay, so those are that's it. I studied this for years with Mike, and trying to figure out how graft works. And those are the three areas where our representatives are caught in a system which affects their votes so that they vote for big money instead of voting for us. You eliminate those three, the only avenues that are left are illegal and can put them in the slammer.
Do you feel you've made any progress on any of those three?
Yes, I'm talking to you.
Okay. Got to do better than me.
I am looking at doing a tour by gyrocopter of the lower 48 states to every state capital. And the idea, it'd be 4 months and 10,000 miles, okay, of flying. And I'll do it with Mike. Mike would be in charge of the ground crew that would follow along with me. But the idea is that although the mainstream media will not cover money in politics, and I'd love to hear what you thought about that part in the book. But yes, the mainstream media is big business, okay? And they can't cover this. But the local newspapers do not know that they're not supposed to cover money in politics, okay? This is at the very top, among the elite bean counters of the top corporations. Okay, that they're aware that we're not going to cover money in politics because it will have an adverse effect on our profitability. All right. But I'm talking to somebody with a newspaper and I'm saying, look, this is a national story that's unfolding in all 48 states and it's going to finish up in Washington, D.C. in a few months. But I'm here and I want to talk to you about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what it's about. The same way I'm talking to you. He doesn't know he's not supposed to cover that. And he will. And it's too small to come up on the radar in New York City. Okay? It will be too small until it's too late. And I am, if this comes together as planned, and I've got the gyrocopter now, okay, if this comes together as planned, we're going to do it with a documentary. I'm going to go ahead and tie in through social media. I'm going to continue to be doing podcasts when I'm not flying, which is most of the time. And I'm going to promote this idea that the voters have the power, okay, to turn over in a single election to where we have a majority in Congress who will vote for honesty and close those three areas legally and permanently, okay, so that there isn't any avenue of illegal, there isn't any avenue of legally selling out. You can only do it illegally, and you have to take a chance on prison and the big ugly dudes you meet.
Yeah. So did you get the gyrocopter back from the that you used? Did you ever get that one back?
No, the Department of Justice, after I finished up my stint in prison, they let me know that they were going to destroy it. And I have it from a few people that, yes, it actually did happen. This is what I predicted with the first interview that I did. The first major interview I did was with George Stephanopoulos. And he asked me what I thought would happen to the gyrocopter. I said, I think they're going to melt it down and make beer cans out of it. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, I'm still laughing after his interview with Alec Baldwin. So hard to take Mr. Stephanopoulos too seriously. So, and then your buddies that you learned to fly with, did you ever make up with them? Are you friends with those guys now, or do they kind of turn their backs on you?
No, absolutely not. And you know from the book, but the listeners won't. Most of these guys, my flying buddies, were Republicans, and staunch Trump supporters, and they're really there. And when I was flying with them, they kind of watched me for the first few months, but they decided that I was a little strange, but okay. And we get along fine, and we still don't agree on politics. But I can, will, and do trust my life to them. They give me advice on modifications that I'm making to my gyrocopter. They're the people who taught me how to fly. And we're still quite friends.
Good. And now in the book, you didn't talk a lot about what the experience was like in prison. They didn't send you to a cush country club facility. How rough was that? How long were you in for?
I was in for 4 months, and I was surprised how well I fit in. I use the phrase "big ugly dudes," and it applies to some and not to all. I certainly wasn't sent to a medium security prison where the dynamics are really bad. I was sent to Miami, to a high security prison, but it's FDC Miami, which is a detention center. And the reason, ordinarily a detention center is for people who are detained prior to their trial. And what it is this like 13-story high-rise in downtown Miami, right across from the courthouse. The people who are accused of a crime cannot be forced to do labor. And the Bureau of Prisons doesn't hire people to do any work that they can have the prisoners do. So they've got an entire floor of people who were convicted prisoners who were there to provide slave labor, to do the cooking and the cleaning and the stuff that they can't require the other people who are under arrest but not convicted to do. But I mentioned in the book that it was odd that when I was sent to Miami, I didn't get sent to that floor, and I didn't know what the deal was. When I was sent to Miami, they just said, "You're going," and I did the background, and it's like a really scary place. There wasn't anything I could do about it. But when I got there, I wasn't sent to the floor that's designated for the people who were convicted. I was sent up to another floor, and I spent only one day on that floor before I was reassigned down. But before I went to Miami, I asked my congresswoman about the whole thing because it seemed odd which prison I had been sent to. And she asked the chief of staff who was there for that meeting, she said, "Is that something we can look into?" And he says, "Yeah, it is." So I know that in the first week that I was there, I was asked to sign papers that allowed the prison to release information to my congresswoman. So I know she followed up on it. I do not know for a fact. When I say I think or it may be, I'm speculating, and I know the difference between speculating and fact. But it's my opinion that somebody in Congress wasn't happy that I only got 4 months. Okay, there were a couple of people who are members of Congress who specified that they thought I should have been shot dead coming in. Okay, so I'm not speculating when I say I wasn't real popular with some members of Congress, and probably because of the message that I brought. So I think that what may have happened is somebody in Congress called somebody in the Bureau of Prisons and says, 4 months isn't enough. Can you make this a memorable experience for Doug Hughes? And that person in the Bureau of Prisons says, well, there's not a whole lot that we can do. There are standards. And they said, there's got to be something you can do. I said, well, we can always make a mistake. And if we made a mistake where we intended to send this guy to Miami and he gets put on the wrong floor, then he winds up getting the full experience of the big ugly dudes. But then the warden wound up that a congresswoman was going to be looking over the shoulder of this whole thing. And all of a sudden he goes, hey, I'm going to lose. When this hits the fan and they're looking for a fall guy, it's going to be me. Okay, so the warden may have been asked by higher up to make sure that I had a fun time, but he pulled his horns in and I wound up getting assigned to the one floor. And it's on that floor, 2 wings of that floor, there's only a couple of hundred people. And it's not so bad because 200 people isn't enough for the polarization that happens. There's 3 main gangs that happen. There's white supremacists, there's Hispanics, and there's blacks. Those are the 3 gangs in medium security prisons that make life hell. But there has to be a large enough number for that to happen. And on one floor, it doesn't happen. And so I wound up with a bunch of guys without gangs, and there was not the fierce violence and daily fear for your life that exists in a medium security prison. But I was supposed to be sent to a camp or a low security prison, which is why the alarms went off in my head.
Yeah. Oh, sure. They certainly had it out for you. Now, do you miss working for the Postal Service at all? Most people think of Newman and Seinfeld when they think of the post office.
Oh,
you didn't seem too in love with that job.
I liked the work. Okay, I enjoyed delivering the mail. I enjoyed getting to know my customers, and that part of it was fine. And the problem is that the Postal Service, the management considers the people who actually deliver the letters and the clerks who do the sorting and all that, they had our guts and they make life hell for us. So there's a perpetual war that's the hallmark of bad management, but there's a perpetual war between postal management and the people who actually do the stuff that people pay money for, the actual picking up and delivering letters. So no, I don't miss postal management. But I know I don't enjoy getting drowned in a Florida downpour, but overall, I like the work.
Now, did you ever patch things up with the brother that was kind of the one you thought tipped you off to the
But
feds?
a year before I flew, the U.S. Secret Service knocked on my door, and it's not hypothetical. The U.S. Secret Service told me that my brother gave them a letter, and I had written him a letter that detailed everything that I was going to be doing. So it's not that I think my brother tipped them off. Okay. They knew everything that was in the letter.
But did you guys
And
ever work that out? Did you get past? I mean, that's a pretty tough thing to get past.
um, no, I have made it clear to Pat through the rest of my family um, that I just don't want to have anything to do with him. And I haven't villainized him with my family. I haven't made the personal fight a family fight. But I've said if it's a family get together and he's going to be there, I'm sorry, I'm going to beg off. I've got something else to do that weekend. Okay. I won't have anything to do with him. I won't attend a get together where he's there. And how I'm going to handle funerals when we start kicking off, I don't know. But no, sorry, I don't find any record in the gospel where Jesus forgave Judas or any of the apostles took Judas under their wing and said, yeah, it's okay.
Now you still have plans in front of you. When you look back, I don't like to refer to it as a stunt, but when you look back at what you did, was it worth it?
Oh, yes. Um, my hope is that I'll live long enough to see it happen. Okay. A wall of separation between big money and our government. That's my goal. That's the top item on my bucket list. And I believe that it can happen. It will happen at some point in time. The further things go with corporate control of the US government, the uglier it's going to be when it does change. I think it can happen without bloodshed. I think it can happen without the country falling into complete ruin. So I'm trying as hard as I can to see that this happens in my lifetime. It was worth it for me to try. It's critical to me that I have an outcome independent look, because if I said, I'm going to be crushed if this doesn't happen the way I want it to, I'm setting myself up to die a bitter person. And I don't want to die a bitter person. I'm content if I did everything that I could to see that this happens. All right. Then I've done what I was supposed to do if I have given it my best effort. And I believe that people won't respond to me if I'm desperate. All right. But I think they are responding to me when I approach this rationally, and I'm not doing it to advance my political position, my favor as a progressive, but I'm doing it to advance the country, everybody. And this resonates.
Now, in my last documentary film, it was called The Last House Standing, and it was about how poorly structures are built in this country. People buy houses that get destroyed every year by storms. And, builders lobby to keep the standards down. Politicians don't lobby and hard enough to change the building codes because it costs money to do that. And so the reality is, in my opinion, the only way things are going to change is for the people who are buying the houses, you and me, to demand more and to expect a better quality, because we're the ones that get wiped out every time there's a disaster. I think that's an uphill battle. Slowly, you start to see better construction and techniques coming out. And, there's a lot of people working hard on making that happen. Do you feel you have a lot of people behind you to make what you're trying to do happen? Do you feel the infrastructure is in place to actually get this to happen?
Yeah. And at the end of the book, I've got a section called a call to action. And I identify a number of groups where I know the leadership personally. They came to my assistance when I was on trial. Okay. And they're the real deal. I identify some of them as conservative leaning and some of them as liberal leaning, and most of them are not affiliated with any political. Okay. But these groups comprise literally millions of people. Okay. And what I'm trying to do is throw interest in the issue of money and politics to those groups wherever you feel comfortable. I don't identify one as the Messiah. Okay. I'm saying, here's the websites, go ahead and look at them. And if you find one that speaks to you, that's where you should be. But then all of the groups can and do operate as a movement. And it needs to be that you're willing to shift over to put your political weight behind another group that may be doing it a little bit differently if they're going to break through. So you have different groups going at it different ways, and like that's cool. But they all operate together. And all I'm doing, because I don't want to build a structure and a hierarchy and have a payroll, okay? I'm doing this independently, and my recommendation is, okay, find a group that you're happy with, listen to them about what's going on, and try to respond as best you can when they ask for help, okay? It may be sending them a few bucks, it may be participating in a demonstration, it may be writing letters, but I'm saying tie in and be involved. What I believe can be done, okay, through the primary strategy that I describe in the book, will allow us to get there faster, but it doesn't conflict with any of what any of these groups are doing. So I'm working with them, and no, I sure as heck don't feel alone.
Well, we'll see how powerful this group is. If you can get them all to listen to this podcast, that's a good way of gauging. If all of a sudden 1 million people listen to this podcast, I'll know you're getting your word out. What do you think?
It occurred to me yesterday when I was watching a podcast with a larger panel group, that may be something that they want to do, is get together and start podcasting, or have me go ahead and do podcasting with one of those leaders who has got a mailing list of 500,000 people, okay? Because if they can go ahead and spray a list of 500,000 people to say, hey, Mike is going to be on with Doug Hughes, so all of you people who are part of that group, I'm thinking at the moment of Wolfpack, but not them exclusive. But if I showed with a friend of mine named Mike, who's the head of Wolfpack, yeah, he can go ahead and promote that and blow it out of the water. Now that makes it more attractive to a larger podcast. So yeah, you just said what finally occurred to me. I'm slow, but yeah, finally occurred to me yesterday that I am friends with these people and we can do each other favors.
Yeah, it's tough to get people to do that. By the time your episode airs, I'll be about 20 episodes in, and it's tough to find an audience. I mean, it's tough to get people that will give their time to listen to your story. So if you're able to crack that code with what you're trying to do, it's certainly a great way to reach people. And what somebody told me who's been doing this for a long time is it's one at a time. You reach one person, then you reach another. You really can't sit there and go, well, I didn't get 1 million people to listen, because like you say, you're going to get very frustrated if it doesn't happen like that.
Right. So you do the podcast because it's what you believe, and you don't get too worked up about how many people watch this week. You do the right thing and you keep doing it, and let the result happen.
My problem is I'm just really competitive. So if it happens too slowly, I get frustrated. It's like, happen already, happen. Come on, let's make this happen.
If it's a loser, then that's okay. You move on to something else.
That's true.
But if you're just doing a podcast because you think it's the way to get rich and you don't really believe in anything, all right, no, you probably won't ever go anywhere. Okay, but you believe in stuff, and that's what your film thing is about. So yeah, you're there. You'll build the audience if you keep at it.
Yeah, well, that's certainly my goal. And like I say, I loved your book. I love what you're doing. If you had to give advice to somebody who has an idea, obviously they might not go to the steps you did, getting a gyrocopter, learning how to fly, landing it in a place where you could get blown out of the sky. But what advice would you have to somebody who wants to try to move the world, but for whatever reason just has not done it yet?
With the caveat, you do not have the right to hurt anybody else. You do not have the right to do property damage. Okay. Be willing to commit fully. No, for me it was fully, but that's too much to ask of the average person. Be willing to commit to as much as you can spare to advance not just your own personal benefit, but the benefit of the country and society. You've got to think bigger than yourself. This is true of the founding fathers, that they were not just thinking of their own personal well-being. It's always struck me, everybody who signed the Declaration of Independence, by doing that, put their necks in a noose, literally. Okay? Had the war gone badly, which statistically should have been the case, okay, they were committing treason against the crown, and the penalty for that was hanging. Okay? That's courage. I mean, that makes my flight small potatoes. Okay? And everybody can do that, but be willing to commit to as much as you can spare, and it's your decision, not for your benefit, but the benefit of the country and the world. Because after you die, that's what there is the world. Your legacy is what you build that lasts after you.
And what you said is you didn't want to wake up towards the end of your life and go, I could have, or why didn't I? And that should be the reason that people try things anyway. Like you say, if you're not going to get anybody hurt in it, nothing, insane or stupid. And, even your, what you did, you had it under control to a point that you felt it was manageable. And so but that's where the risk comes in. You want people to try things, but there has to be a boundary somewhere.
Yeah, and when I was planning this with my friend, we went to great lengths to minimize the risk to anybody in the ground, where we felt it was statistically similar to what it would be about any airplane flying overhead, which happens every day. Okay. I advertised that I was coming an hour and 20 minutes ahead of time. The Tampa Bay Times broke the story as soon as I took off from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And I flew all the way across the state of Maryland. The northern part of the state is entirely agricultural. Much of what I flew over looked like dairy farms. Okay. It was really the last 20 minutes of the flight where I was flying over areas where there was any likelihood that I would hit a building or a person on the ground. And I gave them a good clear shot at me for an hour. Okay, if they were going to shoot me down. There is risk in everything. And yes, hypothetically, they could have shot me down when I was flying over the Lincoln Memorial, and I could have destroyed the Lincoln Memorial if that's what they had decided to do. But I did everything I could to give the authorities advance warning so that they would be able to make a measured response. I did everything I could so that nobody got hurt and there was no property damage.
Now, the book's called Flight Plan, A Mailman's Aerial Adventure and Special Delivery. How do people get the book? And where's a website they can find you if they want to become part of your mission?
I spent months trying to come up with a catchy name for my website. I came up with DougHughesAuthor.com. Okay. And if you order a copy of the book from there, You have the option of getting an autographed copy, but so far, all of the books I've sent out have somehow had an autograph in it. So if you order from the website, you'll get an autographed copy. You can also get it from Amazon, and it's available. I forget what the heck they call it, the electronic version.
I read it on a Kindle, so that's how I got your book.
And if you're a person who belongs to the Kindle Club, you can read it for free. Okay, so it's in the Kindle Club. But there's lots of ways. There's the two ways: Amazon and my website to get the book. And the idea is not that I'm going to get rich, which I'm so far enormously successful at. The idea is for me to spread the idea that we can do this. It's definitely worth the effort for citizens to do it. And if we do it, we'll have a different and better country than we have.
Very good. Doug, thank you so much for coming on today. I wish you success. I enjoyed the book. I encourage people to read it. And I appreciate your time.
George, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining me for today's Tell Us How to Make It Better podcast. If you know of somebody in your town or your community who is doing something to try to make things better, that they're actually out there trying to solve problems, go to our website, tellushowtomakeitbetter.com. There's a contact form on there. Give me their information, and hopefully they'll be popping up on here as a guest in the near future. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.